Welcome, everyone. My name is Joni Shubin. In 2012, Valerie Habiff and I co-founded Democratic.
Valerie, do you have the script? Can you take over for Joni?
I do not, but I can welcome everybody. I know I don't have my video on, but welcome everybody. We're so excited to see you. Joni, wait, is Joni reconnected or is she still without audio? Joni, you're without audio. Anything you guys can do from your end?
From House District 45, Kyle Rinaudo, candidate for House District 35, Christine Triebsch, candidate for Senate District 32, Representative Mary Frances Williams from District 37, who flipped the seat in a tightly contested race in 2018, and Luisa Wakeman, candidate for House District 43. To our guests tonight, I know I can speak for everyone who's on this Zoom call and thanking you for running for these essential seats. We know we can count on this esteemed panel to work together on the local issues that matter most to us, such as expanding healthcare in Georgia, protecting women's reproductive rights, protecting us from gun violence, preserving and assuring educational opportunities for all Georgia citizens, and standing up in defense of our climate against human forces that continue to pose threats to Georgia's air, land, and water. When we started JDWS, we knew that we wanted to focus on local because local is where we can have the biggest impact. Our #1 priority at this moment is to make sure that all these candidates win their elections and have a seat in our Georgia State Capitol next session. Republicans have had a trifecta with control of our executive branch and our legislative chamber since 2005. Polls now show that we have the ability to flip the 16 seats necessary to assume majority control of our state house. The impact on that will be huge because Democratic representatives no longer will have to fight all the destructive legislation, but instead can focus on productive legislation that we are all longing to see. I want to thank Cobb County Democrats for co-sponsoring tonight's program, along with Mary Barron and Alice Wertheim, our JDWS election outreach coordinators, as well as Eileen Lichtenfeld for organizing and hosting tonight's program. So let the program start, and I'm going to hand the program over to Eileen. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and we've got a lot of territory to cover with 6 candidates, so I'm going to minimize the chit chat and we will dive in. I'm going to ask each candidate to give us a brief introduction, tell us what area they're covering, and just why they're here. So we're going to go in alphabetical order to start with, and then we'll reverse. But to start us off, Connie Cicco.
Hi, I'm Connie Cicco. I am representing, I'm here from District 44, which is in Marietta. It's northeast Cobb and North Cobb. So that's just outside of Pope High School, all the way over to 575, the 75 corridor. It includes Town Center Mall and then down to Barrett Parkway and Piedmont Road. You know, I didn't expect to be a candidate. I don't know if many of you know, I used to be Chief of Staff for Representative Mary Frances Williams. So this is really special for me to be here. I thank you to the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon for having this forum tonight, because this really represents exactly why I'm here. I'm very fortunate to be here because Representative Williams was so generous, and this is a great example of women supporting women and doing what we do best. I stood up to run for this district to help flip this seat and to help gain a majority and to help make it easier for those representatives who are in the caucus to advance legislation that really, really matters. So things like exactly what you were talking about, healthcare, criminal justice reform, education, environmental legislation, all of these things that we have to have changes in so quickly. And so by having these seats, and mine is one of the most flippable seats in our state, by having new representation that really reflects the changing demographics in our districts, we can have that change, and we can have it now. So thank you very much for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Connie. And now we'll turn it over to Sara, who needs to unmute. There you are.
Thank you so much, Eileen. And thank you for everyone in the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with everyone. Sara Ghazal, and I'm running to be the next State House representative here in East Cobb and Sandy Springs in House District 45, which runs literally on the other side of Pope High School all the way to the river and across into Sandy Springs a little bit. So Connie and I are next door neighbors. And I don't need to explain what democratic values are to you all. You all know that we are all wanting the same sorts of policies and the same outcomes for our communities and our families. We all want accessible, affordable healthcare. We all want to support our public schools. We all want to make sure that everyone can make their own healthcare decisions without the government interfering and using its interests above and beyond what we make choices for ourselves. We all want safe schools. We all want common sense gun safety legislation. My background is in voting rights. I was the Democratic Party's voter protection director for 2018 and 2019. So I know firsthand exactly what barriers there are between a voter and their ballot. And that is the gateway to making sure that everyone can express their vision for their future of Georgia, because that's, your vote is your voice. It's the only way that everyday citizens can interact and have a real difference in how they are governed. So these are the issues that I bring to the table and that I want to work on, because I want to make sure that we center our families and that our families thrive. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to talk with everyone tonight.
Thanks, Sara. And Kyle, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you to this great group of folks for organizing this tonight. It's really a pleasure to see so many other candidates. We haven't been able to do any sort of in-person campaigning, so it's always really nice to get together. And these things, this is the only time we get to see each other. My name is Kyle Rinaudo. I'm a Democrat running to represent House District 35 this year in 2020. That House District is Ackworth and Kennesaw, so kind of the northwest corner of Cobb County for anybody who lives there. In the non-campaign life, I'm a music teacher. I'm also a law student. I grew up right here in Ackworth, and actually my mom grew up here too. We both went to North Cobb High School, and my family's lived here a really long time. And in that time, we've seen this community grow and change quite a bit, right? You know, anybody who's lived here in Cobb County for a while knows that we are very much a different county, a better county than we were, 30 years ago. But in that same time, I kind of got this feeling in these last couple of years that we haven't really seen our representation change, right? Here in House District 35, we've had the same state representative for 15 years. And, I teach high school students who are about to get their driver's license driving on the road today that weren't even alive when this guy started serving in office. And so you just got to kind of wonder if such a person really represents our values. And, I knew in 2018 that because of Ed Setzler's stances on cutting access to healthcare, cutting funding from our public schools, opposing equal rights at every turn, that we needed to have some new representation, right? We needed to have somebody in this community that actually represents us. So I decided in 2018 to run for this seat. We were unsuccessful that year, but in the general election, Ed Setzler only won by 1,000 votes. So we've got a really great chance to win this seat this year, not just by the numbers, but also because it's really important to make a difference in the State House. Ed Setzler, our current representative, was the lead sponsor of House Bill 481 last year, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, which is the bill that criminalizes women's access to reproductive health care in this state. That's just one of many issues that, frankly, Ed is way out of step with the values of our community. We're ready to elect a representative who is truly going to work to move us forward, right? Who is really ready to move our community and our state into the 21st century. That's the type of representative that I'm going to be, and that's why I'm running.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, now we're on to Christine Triebsch.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, thank you. I'm Christine Triebsch, running for State Senate District 32, which is East Cobb and a little bit of North Fulton County, the Sandy Springs area. Thank you, Jewish Democratic Women's Salon. Thank you so much for this forum. This is wonderful. People can hear all of the candidates, and it's fantastic. So I am the wife of a Cobb County school teacher. I'm the mom of 2 children. Ethan is at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, and my daughter Stella is the senior at Pope High School. I am a family law trial attorney. I've lived in Georgia for 27 years, and I've lived in Cobb County for 23 years. I was born in Nebraska, and I was raised in Overland Park, Kansas, with my 4 other siblings. There were 5 of us, and we were raised by my awesome mom, Kate. Just wanted to give you a little bit of that history. I am a Kansas City Chiefs fan, so that's me. In reference to State Senate District 32, this area has been represented by a Republican senator for over 20 years. So it is time for a common sense, compassionate Democrat to be the new senator, and that's going to be me in November. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine. And Luisa, it's your turn. Into the W's.
Yay! Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you to the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon for the work that you do and for this opportunity. My name is Luisa Wakeman. I'm running for State House District 43, which is east of 75, basically south of the 120 loop. It goes down Roswell Road, down Johnson's Ferry to the Acres Mill area. I'm the mom of 2 young adult kids. My husband, John, and I, we raised them in the district. They both graduated from our public schools. I'm a flight attendant with Delta, where I've been almost 30 years. And during the Great Recession, went to nursing school to earn a 2nd degree to step up for our family during the tough financial times. Together with my husband, we worked hard to make ends meet. And now I'm looking to step up for our district. I got involved in politics when Donald Trump became the Republican nominee for president, and was just horrified by his words and actions, and knew I needed to do something. I grew up at the knee of my grandparents listening to stories of World War II. They were in the Dutch resistance, fighting Nazi tyranny. And I learned what it was when people looked away. And while I knew we weren't at that point, I knew it was important to get involved, and became a volunteer precinct captain for John Ossoff's campaign for Congress, and then got involved with Moms Demand Action, a nonpartisan group that advocates for common sense gun legislation. Went to the Capitol and asked my representative to vote against guns on campus, and she said she had already traded her vote for something else, and I felt like she had traded the safety of my kids and the kids in our district for something a lot less important. Ran against her in 2018, came 792 votes short of winning the seat against one of the more highly funded Republicans, and we're going to finish the job in November.
Great. Thanks, Luisa. And Mary Frances, you get to wrap us up on this section.
All right. Whoops, wait a minute. Let's see. All right. Hi, I'm Representative Mary Frances Williams. Thank you so much to the Jewish Democratic Women's Salon for helping me and other fabulous down ballot candidates compete and win this coming election. I'm proud to represent House District 37, which includes, it's a very heavily gerrymandered district, but it represents parts of the city of Marietta. It goes way out west Cobb, south of Whitlock Avenue, and then it has a corner of northeast Cobb up near Canton Highway and Barrett Parkway all the way over to Piedmont Road. So it's got 3 totally different areas. But that's the district. I've served since my election in 2018 when I defeated a 4-term member of the House Republican leadership. And I had a 30-year career as a nonprofit advocate working on behalf of children and families. I got really frustrated and increasingly frustrated as I watched the House Republican leadership ignore year after year important issues such as hate crimes, real and affordable access to health care for all Georgians, lack of support for public education, while they kept supporting vouchers and redirecting state dollars to private schools. It's a long list. And I knew that the voters in this House District 37 care about those issues, and I wanted their voices heard at the state capitol. So that's why I ran for office. And since my election, I've been fighting for the families of the district and working hard to support funding for public education. I'm also frustrated by the leadership's handling of this pandemic. So when we return to the session, I will continue to stand up and fight for the health, safety, and security of all Georgians.
Thank you very much, Mary Frances. Now we're going to come back to Mary Frances, but what we'd like to know from all of the candidates, so we'll be going in turn, is what specific legislation do you want to support when you hit the Capitol Dome? Like, what's first on your agenda? So Mary Frances, we'll let you take that too. Since you had to wait before, we'll let you continue on. And you get 3 minutes for your response, please.
Okay. Well, what I really am looking forward to working on is getting back and working on COVID, this state's response to COVID-19. It's been shameful, and there are many pieces to that, but the refusal to expand Medicaid is a big part of that. We've had two rural hospitals close, I think, within the past 12 months, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. And we have uninsured folks here in Georgia, and it's costing hospitals a lot of money. And the bottom line is there are an awful lot of people who just can't go to see the doctor, can't get care when they need it. And so health problems get worse, and when they do go to the doctor, it's more expensive and worse for them. So working on the healthcare system is one of the top things I want to do. And the other thing is I think this week Georgia has dropped yet again in our health ranking in the nation. So there are many aspects to dealing with this, but we need economic recovery for individuals, families, and businesses, especially small businesses. And this record unemployment that most of the incumbent legislators are having to deal with, because we are basically the call center for anyone who's having an unemployment issue. We're actually literally taking calls from people, putting them into a spreadsheet, and sending those cases over to the Department of Labor, begging for them to help these people. So we know how bad, how many people are suffering and how long they've gone without any income. I remember the draconian cuts in 2008 because I was down there, and I just we need members in the House who have the leadership and are willing to to do the hard work and not repeat the mistakes that we made in 2008. We need to leverage federal aid and maximize state revenues and budget resources, and we need federal assistance, which is where Medicaid comes into. And it's also time to modernize and improve our tax code. And that's plenty to get started with.
I would say so. Okay. Luisa, what would you do? What's first on your agenda to get done at the Gold Dome?
Well, I'm going to sign on to Mary Frances's Medicaid expansion bill. It's despicable that we have rejected tax dollars that we have, put into the system and sent it to other states while our healthcare system suffers just because of political, reasons. And people are suffering because of that. It's not okay. So definitely we need to bring those federal dollars back into Georgia's healthcare system with Medicaid expansion. But let's talk about something else that was in the state budget this last legislative session. The budget was passed on strictly party lines, which is very unusual. It was passed by just Republicans because of what they took out and did not negotiate. They took $1 billion of funding for our public schools at a time when we're asking our teachers and students to step up in extraordinary ways. There were a lot of ways that they could have minimized that at the very least. But in the end, when there's a budget cut, it's the burden is put on our kids and teachers. My kids graduated from the public schools, and their almost entire K through 12 career was under austerity cuts. And we're looking at another generation going through that. That's not okay. We need to prioritize the funding of our public schools as a separate component in the budget so that it's not, the burden isn't carried by our teachers and students.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
Wow. Thank you, Eileen. Well, Representative Mary Frances Williams and Luisa Wakeman, you must have seen my notes because number one is expanding Medicaid. Number one is critical. You know, I think it's 1 in 12 states have not expanded. So we are 1 in 12 that has not expanded it. We need to expand. You know, Georgians are dying. And people don't think about that, but our friends, our relatives, our neighbors are dying because they don't have health insurance and we are in a pandemic. So we need to expand Medicaid. Why wouldn't we make folks' lives better if we could? And we can with the expansion. But anyway, number two, definitely public education. The cut, $1 billion essentially was cut from the budget. And we're again in the middle of a pandemic, knowing that these children needed to be educated and somehow get back to school somehow, some way, but yet it was still slashed and cut. But so that's important. Number three, if I could repeal a law right now, it would be guns on college campus. There is no sense that our kids have guns on college campus. They don't need them in the classrooms. They don't need them in tailgating events. They don't need them in the student recreation center, period. They just don't need it. And I would love to see that law repealed. Thank you, Eileen.
Super. Okay. Kyle, you're up.
Awesome. Well, I agree with Christine that we all have very similar values, right? This is why we decided to run for office, right? Because we recognize that there are these really crucial issues that, frankly, our current leaders, no matter where they are in Cobb County or Greater Atlanta, aren't addressing, right? So for me, I absolutely agree. We need to be expanding access to healthcare for voters and in our community here in Acworth and Kennesaw by expanding Medicaid. We need to be fully investing in our public schools and not cutting more than $1 billion from our public education and healthcare system at a time of a pandemic, right? That's what our leaders are doing right now. We need to have new leadership to make that happen. We also need to make sure we're protecting reproductive freedom in our state. We're going to talk about that next, so I'm going to save my 3 minutes on that for next. We need to make sure we're ensuring criminal justice reform to make sure that the Black Lives Matter protests are enshrined in legislation, making sure that the goals of that movement are actually put forward in legislation rather than just talked about in protests, right? That's a key reason I think a lot of us are running. And making sure that we're protecting our environment, right? There's lots of solutions that are currently in the State House in order to protect our rivers and stream from coal ash pollution, to make sure that we're having sustainable vehicles, sustainable buildings. These are all things that we can make a difference on and that are reasons that I'm running, but that I would love to make a difference on. Now, one thing specifically, I'm cheating on this question a little bit. One thing specifically that I'd like to introduce is a bill on voting rights, which I know Sara Ghazal is about to go after me, so I'm sure she'll correct everything I get wrong here. But you know, when I was growing up here, I was part of a board, the Acworth Young Alderman Board, that works to involve more young people in politics. It's a goal that still is something that I'm very passionate about, because our generation, you know, the younger generation, doesn't participate in a lot of local politics. We make voting very difficult for all people, but particularly young people. But our generation is going to be the one that's most affected by so many of these issues, right? By investing in public education and higher education, by making sure we're preserving our environment from climate change. All these issues make a difference. in our community, and we need to have a voice. But we make it very difficult to vote. So the things that I would want to make sure that we're doing to change that is make sure we have automatic voter registration in our state, stop the voter purges. We can write legislation to make that happen, make sure that everybody who wants to vote can vote, making sure we're instituting statewide vote by mail, as a number of other states have done. That's a way to increase participation, so that if you have to work on election day or other things, you can still make your voice heard. And we've got to be preventing gerrymandering in the future, right? So there are some other states in the union that have passed legislation that require nonpartisan redistricting commissions, right? To make sure that the legislative districts that we're running in are actually fair, right? And actually represent the communities that we're running to represent, and aren't just chosen by politicians for their own benefit, right? These are things, by the way, that I think most people agree on. I think not just Democrats want to make sure that healthcare is affordable, that our schools are well funded, that their vote is actually going to count. We just actually have to elect representatives this year who are truly going to work to make it happen. So those are some of the priorities that I would definitely be working on.
All right. And Sarah, now you get to correct Kyle.
Perfect.
I won't correct Kyle. I can just put a little bit of a finer point on some of these, but I will say that as Representative Williams said, we're in the midst of a pandemic, which is why when the state legislature went back for an emergency session to declare emergency powers, I actually spearheaded a letter from, I think, pretty much every candidate on this call, calling for the governor and the state house to expand Medicaid back in April or March, when the emergency session was called, because it is so critical to make sure that everybody in Georgia has access to affordable health care. And the last time there were cuts to the education budget at this level, it took 10 years to restore full funding. We've fully funded our education formula for 2 years of the past 19. We can't wait another decade before our schools are funded again at the levels with a formula that was developed 40 years ago, when school looked completely different, I will say. So we really need to be looking very hard at the formula that we have that we're still not funding, and seeing whether or not that serves a 21st century education. And of course, voting rights. Absolutely. We have to have clean voter lists. That's the only way that elections can be administered, but you don't do that by punishing people who choose not to vote. And you don't do that by removing people who, through no fault of their own, gets a piece of mail bounced back. Those are terrible proxies, and they lead to eligible voters being removed from our voter rolls. So those are very easy fixes. We need to make sure that everyone who's eligible to cast a ballot can do so. We don't need an artificial 1 month blackout period before election day to make sure everyone's registered, because we have modern databases. That's the way it works nowadays. You should be able to show up at a polling location, show your documents, and be able to cast a ballot that day through same-day registration. Mm-hmm. And we need to make it much easier to apply for and just get an absentee ballot all the way through by only having to sign up once. I have applied for an absentee ballot on 6 occasions this year, just so that I can vote from home. That's ridiculous. It creates a huge burden on counties to administer this, and the costs are enormous. We can reduce costs for the counties and reduce administrative barriers and make it easier for voters by just allowing folks to sign up once to receive absentee ballots all the way through. So those are just some super quick things and obviously so many other areas that we need to work on. Environmental protection, more areas of strengthening our healthcare system. We are the worst in the country for maternal mortality. So just expanding Medicaid is a good first step. It is not the last step. We need to do so much more. And so many other folks have talked about criminal justice reform. Yes, there are steps that we can take to make sure that our police are more accountable, more transparent, and they have the tools they need to de-escalate situations. So that use of force is simply not an issue anymore. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, Connie, bring us home.
Well, I mean, it's always great to be among like-minded people. So I agree with what all the other candidates and what Representative Williams is saying. Of course, we are all on the same page with expanding Medicaid. And I think that a lot of this ties into the pandemic too. I would love to see us advance legislation regarding housing affordability. I come from a working class background, and my father was a builder, and he built a lot of the homes that are actually in the district that I live in now. I grew up in Roswell, but he built throughout East Cobb. And in fact, I it's very lucky that I live where I live. I wouldn't have lived here without the good fortune of the couple who sold us this house. They were retiring, and our offer was not the highest offer. It was just the kindness that they saw that we were a young family and living behind an elementary school, and it would allow us to walk to school every single day. And they sold us this house. It is extremely difficult to find affordable housing in East Cobb, in Cobb County, and we are facing a housing crisis. We are staring it down with this pandemic, with people losing their jobs, with rising unemployment. I know that Representative Williams has been dealing with this, but as a candidate, I have also been dealing with this and involved in a lot of different groups and hearing the stories of people who are unable to get their unemployment claims rectified. So this is going to become more and more of an issue because, once again, Georgia has not dealt with this, and we have let this issue fester for a very long time. We need to think of creative solutions, build houses, make apartments available, and help people, give them assistance, work with landlords. There needs to be eviction moratoriums. We also need to work on raising the minimum wage and really think about what that reasonable number is. Creating jobs that pay people decently and making it really a place where people aren't trying to work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. It would be really wonderful if families could be either, maybe it's just one person who stays at home with the kids. I mean, that would be dreamy for a lot of people. So we need to think about what the Georgia is that we want to create for the future. And this is an opportunity for us, even though there is a pandemic and there is a lot that we have to rectify. This is going to be a time where we can reinvent Georgia and make it the place that we want, because we can do a lot better than what we have right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to transition. I've got a unique question for each of the candidates. And Connie, I'm going to come back to you. And given that we are a women's organization, and I know you've got a background in film and documentaries and telling stories and all. So from that perspective, how do you see women shaping the policies and politics and legislation in the near future?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. I appreciate you very, very much. But don't think that I'm excluding you from this answer. We see women doing this already, and I've seen this in different parts of my career, from the filmmaking that you mentioned. But when women do not have a voice in the area that they're working in, or in specific areas, then they take it upon themselves to claim the modes of production. Filmmaking is a great example. Women teach themselves. They learn how to run the cameras. They learn how to edit, and they create that space, and then they teach the next generation. They teach each other, and they find a way to become the leaders and bring up the next leaders. I am a great example of that, again, because I worked with Representative Williams, and she was a terrific mentor to me, whether or not we knew that was going to happen. But she was super generous, and women have this ability to do that. Women are doing this right now. They are learning how to advocate, to legislate, to govern, and they are creating policies that work for not just for women, because that has a trickle-down effect. They're creating policies and legislation that work for families, for children, for entire communities. And that's how women kind of see the world. And I'm sorry to generalize, but that's what we do. We're creating a better place for the entire community and the space that we occupy. So, specifically, you saw it in the last session where there were lactation stations that were put into the Capitol. That was huge. If you've ever been to the Capitol, you'll know that it's famous for not having a lot of women's restrooms. That's something that's a space that is specifically cut out for one kind of person. And women are certainly trying to create legislation, and you're going to see it with this terrific slate of candidates. You're going to see it come up with maternal mortality, as Sara talked about, with infant mortality programs, with healthcare, with bringing more hospitals, especially to rural areas, with more OBGYNs, because 76 of our counties do not have OBGYNs. 60 don't have physicians or pediatricians. I'm sorry, 60 don't have pediatricians. Like, these kinds of issues have to be addressed, and that's what women are going to do. Every single one of the panelists here mentioned these issues. Those are the kinds of things that we are going to tackle head on. Those and things that affect families, getting women back on track in their careers, helping them get back into working within their communities.
Thank you. That sounds great. When?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
right.
if, but when. Sara, why should the voters choose you, especially since there's been an incumbent there for what, 12 years, 18 years? 18 years.
And I think, that right there is a reason for a change. The incumbent in this district has been in there for 18 years, and what does he have to show? What voters will get from me is somebody who will absolutely go to the mats. Anyone who knows me knows I never back down from a fight, and I will always center the families and the small businesses in this district, and I will put them first. I am a mom. I've got two daughters in our local schools, and I'm an attorney. So I know what it takes to raise a family with two working parents here, and I'm committed to this community. And, I don't care where we start, but where we end up is going to be working for the betterment of our community and putting families first. I don't care so much about politics. I'm about policy and outcome. And that's what the voters are going to get when they vote for me. Somebody who is always going to be accessible, always going to be transparent, but somebody who's really going to work for them and put them first. So that's very simply why folks should be voting for me.
Super.
Yeah, we might
We
change.
need to gain some time. Okay. Kyle, you're up. If you're successful in unseating Ed Setzler, what steps can you take to undo the horrible abortion ban that he sponsored?
Well, that's a great question. And the first thing I want to say is when we win this district. It's so important that we do that, not just for this issue, but also for so many issues across the state that are vital to our community. So when we beat Ed Setzler, you're absolutely right. It's critical that we do work to undo this abortion ban. For those of y'all who don't know, and I don't know how many people that is, but for those of you who don't know, Ed Setzler was the lead sponsor of House Bill 41 last year. House Bill 41, you might have heard, was the abortion ban bill. A lot of people remember when that bill passed and a lot of the protests that were happening at the Capitol trying to get that, to stop that bill from passing. It criminalizes access to women's access to choice here in our state. Before I do talk about how we solve it, I think I just want to emphasize first of how much of a difference that these local races can make, right? Because the only reason that Setzler and these conservative extreme Republicans were able to introduce and pass that bill is because they won this district here in House District 35 in 2018, right? Salvatore Castellan and I ran in 2018 to make sure that we did have a progressive pro-choice voice here in the General Assembly, and we only lost in the general election by 1,000 votes. So the difference between House Bill 41 never being introduced at all and passing and being signed by Governor Kemp is literally just 1,000 votes in my hometown. Right. And so when you think about it that way, your vote really matters. This work that we're doing matters. Those of you who are watching, the work that you do for local campaigns, it matters because this is what's going to make sure that we actually elect representatives this year that truly represent our values. So anyway, to answer the question that you did ask, what can we do to reverse this, right? The first thing we have to do is formally repeal House Bill 41. Thankfully, it was stopped as unconstitutional by the federal courts. Everybody on this call knew that that was going to happen, right? Because we already knew that women's right to choice is enshrined as a constitutional right. We already knew it was unconstitutional. The courts just affirmed this, but we still need to repeal it. The other thing that we need to make sure that we're doing is addressing all the other areas of unequal access to women's reproductive health care in our state, right? Right now, we have one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the country, right? It rivals most underdeveloped nations. It's very dangerous to give birth in our state right now. we need to reform that. The way that we can do that is making sure that we're expanding Medicaid coverage, not just generally, but also making sure we're expanding it to women who have given birth up to 6 months to a year of pregnancy. We already have a challenge with OBGYNs and physician providers in rural areas of our state. We have to do more to make sure that those providers are in rural areas. We need to also make sure that we're enacting other recommendations of the recent Maternal Mortality Commission. We need to make sure that there's accurate sex education in our schools, make sure contraceptives and reproductive care is available to our people in our state, right? This is an issue about basic healthcare access. It's about equal rights. It's about economic empowerment for Georgia's women. It's a matter of life and death for many low-income, rural, or working women in our state, right? And so it's so disappointing that instead of working to solve these problems like we're going to do starting in January 2021, that our current representatives instead voted to move us backwards, to take away women's rights. That's not the values of our community. That's an extreme, dangerous position for our state representatives to take. So the good news is this: we've got a good chance this year to elect something better, to take those concrete actions to make sure we're moving forward and to make sure that we're truly fighting for Georgia's women and families.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, Christine, you're a family law attorney. Can you shed any light on how that impacts your stance on gun safety?
Certainly. So this week I had a woman call me about a divorce, and she was in the house, her husband was in the house, and her 3 children were there as well, young children. She was crying and talking very softly, and she said that she was very nervous because her husband said that he was going to shoot her if she leaves the house. So I told her, I said, okay, what I need to do is get you some relief. Let me see about getting a temporary protective order. Let me talk to you about, or get some information about a shelter, because something needs to happen right away. And I said to her, call me in 10 minutes. I'm gonna find some relief for you. I need you to call me in 10 minutes. So I hung up, got some information. I waited for her to call, she didn't call. So it was about 15 minutes later, I called her. And I said, hey, it's me. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't order that, and I think you've got the wrong number. I said, thank you very much. I hung up. I immediately called law enforcement. So she called me back and she said, thank you so much for calling law enforcement. I couldn't do it. You did it for me. You saved my life. If you had not done that, if law enforcement hadn't come, I would be dead. Thank you. So the question is, how did this individual get a gun? How did he get a gun? I don't know. I don't know the history. I don't know. You also have attorneys that are shot and killed by their clients' ex-spouses in domestic matters. You have murder-suicide. I'll get up in the morning, I'll hear the news, and there's a murder-suicide. And I'll think, okay, which past client was this of mine, possibly, or is it a current client? Because it is very emotionally charged, domestic issues, divorces. So people are just very, very, very emotional. So I would support common sense gun safety legislation. I would support red flag laws as well. We need to take that guns out of the hands of folks that are going to harm themselves or harm somebody else, at least, especially during these domestic situations. So, and due process is also involved in this process of red flag laws, but I will work very, very hard for common sense gun safety legislation, which is what we need. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Christine. Luisa, given your background as a registered nurse, as well as a flight attendant, but speaking more to the healthcare side of it, can you comment on Georgia's COVID response? And also, as we've been talking about, our deplorable maternal death rate. And also, I was just reading, we are now 49th in the nation for access and affordability to healthcare. So.
Yeah, and thank you, Eileen. Healthcare is a big topic in this race because I'm a registered nurse, but my opponent is chair of the House Health and Human Services Committee and has been chair of that committee for over 10 years, able to influence and set healthcare policy for Georgia. In that time, it has become more dangerous for mothers postpartum. Our healthcare cost has increased, our quality has decreased, and as long as she's in office, there will not be Medicaid expansion. But as far as the current topic on hand, the COVID response, it has been pure and simple a failure of leadership. Brian Kemp put together a COVID task force that was all partisan except for Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who ended up leaving because of the mass dispute, because she wanted to protect people in the city of Atlanta from the virus spread. And my opponent is on that task force, and in late March told our Cobb delegation that, and she has access to all the experts. I mean, we're right up the street from the CDC. It's not like you have to go far for, healthcare experts. It's not a far reach. She told the Cobb delegation that the COVID virus was nothing more than the common flu and that people should keep calm and carry on. That is so frustrating because Georgians are paying the price with their health, some with their lives. And I know probably each of you know someone who has been affected. And our economy is not going to be able to start back until we've dealt with the virus, because it's all related to that. So just gonna put a plug in, wash your hands, watch your distance, wear a mask. It's super important. It's the most loving thing that you can do for your the people around you, for our community. But as far as the maternal mortality crisis, it has been a failure. It has been, they tried to address it by expanding Medicaid for new moms for 3 months. The recommendation was for a year. Expand Medicaid and new moms will be covered for the first year, period. We need to stop playing political games with people's lives.
For sure. Representative Williams, as this evening's only incumbent, everybody else is a newbie, you currently serve on the Natural Resources and Environment Committee. I hope I got that right, among others. Which environmental issues are you focused on and do you think are of the most importance to Georgia?
Well, thank you for that question. There's so many issues. One that I have gotten deeply involved in has been coal ash. At one of the first committee meetings I attended, I learned that there are over 6 million tons of coal ash that are being moved into unlined pits on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, literally 700 feet, and it's in South Cobb. So I've lived there my whole life, and I didn't know that. And with that issue, as with so many other issues, whether it be shore protection or what we do with our national forests here in Georgia, there's one thread that seems to run through all of it. The bills that the Republicans are trying to pass, and in some instances are passing if they get away with it, tend to take that element out of a process that lets people who live in an area have public comment, have public notice. They don't, and unfortunately, the Environmental Protection Division in this state, which is part of the Department of Natural Resources, is not backing up the people of Georgia. So with one thing after another, we've had this issue, whether it be sterigenics, changing that law, we had to really force the Republicans to put in language that just simply said that there would be public notice when there were leaks. And with coal ash, we had to change the law that said that when coal ash ponds are dewatered, which is part of a step to closing them down. In other words, when that water from those coal ash ponds is dumped into the Chattahoochee, well, it has to, the people in the area have to be told. I mean, can you imagine that we don't have the right in most instances to know when these environmental events are happening? And so I'm passionate about the coal ash. Coal ash belongs in lined pits, and it's being done in other states. And big utilities do not own this state's rivers and streams. You know, those rivers and streams belong to the people of Georgia. They're not the trash can of big utilities. So that's what I'm really working hard on. But also anything related to any environmental process or hearing that says that the people of Georgia have a right to know what's going on and have a right to comment. Thank you.
Great. Well, believe it or not, we are running ahead of schedule, which I am shocked at, but especially because it's a Jewish event here, you know, we're notorious for running late. But in any event, what I wanted to close out with is if each of you could then take about a minute and tell us one thing besides money, because we know you all want money, but one thing that you need, you know, our participants, our members to do for you. And then any kind of closing words, but I am going to be tight on the 1 minute though. So, okay. Yeah. So Mary Frances, we will come back to you on that.
Okay. So you can go to my website, which is maryfranceswilliams.com. Frances is spelled with an E. And there you can sign up to volunteer. And we really need volunteers. We need volunteers to get a yard sign, help make phone calls, post on social media. There's lots of different things you can do. And of course, you need a donation. But the purpose of all this activity is get people to go all the way to the bottom of the ballot. I mean, and vote for these down ballot races, such as all of us. So that, you know, contacting those voters and making sure they vote all the way down to the bottom of the ballot is what it's all about. Thank you.
Bottom of the barrel, not quite, but bottom of the ballot. Okay. Luisa, bye. Now I can't talk. Luisa, what can folks do for you?
Well, so first I want to say that I wanted to wish everyone ahead of Rosh Hashanah a happy and healthy new year. As far as for the campaign, you can go to Mobilize. We have a link on there. We're going to start Walking with Purpose, hanging literature on doors completely without contact, with masks and very safe. We're doing lots of phone banks and so appreciate any volunteer efforts are really make an impact. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
Thank you.
For you.
All right. What I suggest is that since, you know, everybody's already engaged, if you can find somebody that is not engaged and help them with writing a postcard, you know, texting, making phone calls, you know, maybe they don't, the folks that are not so engaged, maybe they don't know what exactly you're doing. So just say, hey, I'm doing some postcards. Come on over. Here's 3 of them. Why don't you fill them out for me so that we can touch and you know, touch the voters. But I know a lot of us are also working together, we're collaborating. So call a campaign and you may be calling to work for my campaign, but I may be coordinating with Luisa and Connie. And so you're really helping a number of us out at one time. It's awesome. And you can find me at christineforgeorgia.com. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And for the record, we have posted in the chat as well as on our Facebook page, all the web addresses for all the candidates. Kyle?
Well, thank you, Eileen, and thank you all for hosting this. I want to echo Luisa and wish everyone a happy new year this weekend, happy Rosh Hashanah. What we're doing is the same thing that many of these campaigns are doing, right? We'll be lip dropping every weekend, many weekdays for the next 6 weeks until Election Day. We're also doing phone banking. So if any of y'all are interested in helping us out with socially distanced literature dropping and phone banking, that would be super huge. In addition to just kind of the specific ask, I'll phrase it this way, right? The reason that I decided to run for office is because I'm somebody who always votes every year. I'm always somebody that does the research, right? And so I had decided that, look, this time after Trump's elected, when we have representatives that aren't speaking for us, we've got to take the next step. All of us have to take the next step, whatever that may be. And I will speak for all of the candidates here that running for office is not easy. This is not a comfortable activity. right? But all of us have embraced getting into this uncomfortable position, getting out of our comfort zone, because we recognize that this is so important. So I guess what I would ask all of you, in addition to helping us all out, if you could all commit to doing one thing this year, just one more thing, one more volunteer day that you feel like you've been comfortable with in the past, that's going to make the difference. That's going to help us win this year. So help any of us out tonight, but just do one more action. Help a neighbor vote, get a friend to volunteer, do one more thing to get outside of your comfort zone. And we're going to make this happen this year. So thank you all so much for your help.
Great. All right, Sarah.
So before everyone goes to bed tonight, I hope that you have locked in your plan to vote. Figure out how you want to cast your ballot, check your registration, make sure it's updated, and put it on your calendar when, where, and how you're going to cast your ballot. And then make sure everybody in your circle does the same thing. Choose any one of these candidates, pick a race, adopt it as your own. And then I have a personal request. I have my own ideas, but my campaign is really about listening and hearing from folks. I want to know how I can be an ally to the Jewish community in the State House. So please reach out to me. Let me know what steps I can take, what you need from me. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's on the rise in my district, and hate has no home here. Please reach out. Please let me know what I can do. And very much also, Happy New Year, y'all.
Thank you. And right on time. Connie, you're the last one.
Well, thank you so much again for hosting this. This was very, very nice to be among friends, and I truly mean that. I want to echo what Sarah said. If you are lucky to be in a very blue district already, please adopt a campaign. Get invested, whatever that means to you, but invest, because these races, every single one of these races, these are going to be won, and they're going to be won, but they're going to be slim majorities. And what we are working for are votes of 50 and 100. That's what we're talking about right now. So anything you can do, postcards, lit dropping, phone banking, text banking, everybody is working a program here. Help us out to win those votes that are going to put us over the line. And that will make you feel so good, because you guys, you are ripples. You have so much power, and you can help so many. It's not just us. We're a name. We represent so much. We represent people like you and people all over the state when we get elected. And that's what's important to keep in mind. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. And I truly hope it's a happy New Year.
Thank you. And thank you all for running. As I forget which one of you said it, it's not easy to run, and we really appreciate you guys stepping up and doing that. So that brings our program to a close. Next week, we will be sponsoring cocktails and candidates with Gwinnett County candidates. So that's going to be co-hosted by the Gwinnett Democratic Party. So again, we thank Cobb County Democrats for co-hosting this with us. Lashana Tova to all of our Jewish members here and participants and all. And let's all go to November and turn the Capitol blue. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Eileen.
That was great, Eileen. Good job.